Chapter 2. The museum air tasted of varnished wood and glass cleaner. Katerina inhaled deeply, filtering the human scents, sweat, perfume, the occasional whiff of medication, from the cleaner smells of preservation. The cool, recycled air washed over her heated skin, a balm after the morning's violence. It was 3 hours since she'd watched Victor carve into Luca's face. 3 hours of rage simmering beneath her skin, threatening to bubble over. Her wolf paced restlessly inside her, claws scraping against the cage of control. The memory of Gideon's eyes tracking her as she'd left the lodge made her skin crawl. His russet-haired head turning to follow her movement, nostrils flaring as if scenting something that belonged to him. The enforcer's interest had grown more obvious over recent months, lingering glances that felt like hands on her skin, casual touches that lasted too long, the way he positioned himself to block her exit during pack gatherings. Victor's favourite hunter thought pack politics might eventually deliver what his charm never could. The thought made her stomach turn. She'd rather swallow liquid silver than endure Gideon's version of courtship. There was something twisted in him. He'd had a sadistic streak even as a cub. The Atlanta History Museum had become her refuge over the past decade. It was just far enough away from the national forest to give her a sense of refuge. Humans moved through the exhibits with their dull senses and shorter lives, oblivious to the predator walking among them. They catalogued their wars and weapons with clinical detachment, as if death were a curiosity rather than the constant companion it truly was. Katerina loved it, because it reminded her how many of the uncomfortable things in life were temporary, and that she would long outlast them so long as she remained on her guard. She drifted through the main gallery toward the special exhibition hall. A placard announced the temporary display: Blades of Power, Medieval and Renaissance Weaponry. Perfect. Steel and purpose, craftsmanship and death, a language she not only understood, but in which she found beauty. The exhibition space opened before her, glass cases arranged in a loose chronological path. Late morning sunlight filtered through high windows, catching on polished metal and casting prismatic reflections across polished parquet floors. Only 3 other visitors occupied the space: an elderly couple hunched over a display of ceremonial daggers, and a man studying a longsword with unusual intensity. Something about him snagged her attention. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the solid build of someone who worked with his hands. His dark, wavy hair was pulled back without affectation in a short tail at his nape. He wore no uniform, but moved with the confidence of someone who belonged, adjusting the small identification card attached to a leather cord around his neck. Not security, not a casual visitor either. Katerina circled away, drawn to a display of hunting knives. The placard detailed their use in medieval hunting rituals, the hierarchical distribution of the kill. She snorted softly. Humans and their rules about prey, as if nature cared who took the first bite. Beautiful craftsmanship, aren't they? The voice came from behind her, deep and quiet. The man from the longsword display had approached without her noticing, an unusual feat given her heightened senses. She tensed, inhaling his scent. Clean sweat, metal polish, and something earthy, like newly cut wood. "The balance is wrong on this one," she replied, nodding toward a curved blade labelled as a 14th century hunting knife. Too heavy at the pommel. The man's eyebrows rose, genuine surprise crossing his features. "You're right." He glanced at the display card. "They've mislabeled it too. That's a baselard, not a hunting knife, primarily a self-defense weapon." Katerina allowed herself a small smile. "I know." He studied her with new interest, his brown eyes warming. Most visitors don't spot curatorial errors in medieval weaponry. She shrugged, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "Most visitors don't pay attention. I'm Rhys Morgan." He extended his hand, then seemed to think better of it, dropping it back to his side. I'm consulting on this exhibition, authenticating and cataloguing the collection. You're the expert, then. She kept her tone neutral, though curiosity stirred. The man's hands bore calluses, not just a scholar, but someone who worked with the weapons he studied. On paper. His mouth quirked, but clearly not the only one in the room. The compliment warmed her despite herself. Only a very powerful wolf would so casually give away status like that. She hadn't found her, admittedly limited interactions with human males to be very different, especially when caught mansplaining. Katerina turned back to the display, aware of him watching her. The smart choice would be to walk away. Engaging with humans beyond necessity invited dangerous complications. Victor's rage from this morning still hung in her memory. What he'd do if he discovered her fraternizing with a human male didn't bear contemplating. This one, she said instead, pointing to a slender blade with an ornate hilt. Spanish? The display card was missing specifics. Rhys moved closer, the heat of his body registering against her heightened senses. Toledo steel, mid-15th century. The craftsmanship is exceptional. Look at the inlay work on the guard. His enthusiasm seemed genuine, his knowledge impressive for a human. Katerina found herself responding to his passion, despite her better judgment. The balance would be perfect, she mused. Light enough for quick strikes, strong enough to penetrate mail. You sound like you've handled your share of blades. There was no suspicion in his voice, only professional curiosity. Katerina kept her expression neutral. I collect. Antiques, mostly. A fellow enthusiast. His smile deepened, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. Any particular period or region? Eastern Europe, 16th to 18th century. She focused on keeping a small smile fixed on her face, rather than explaining that the reason her collection was so extensive from that era is she'd had to fight her way through it in order not to be hunted down like most of her family had been. Russia was no fan of lupines. The golden age of saber development. He nodded appreciatively. I'd love to see your collection sometime. The invitation hung in the air between them. Katerina's wolf bristled at the presumption, even as another part of her, a part she rarely acknowledged, responded to the warmth in his eyes. You're very forward, Mr. Morgan. Rhys, he corrected, and it was a professional observation, not a line. The dimple appeared again, though I admit that I wouldn't object if you took it as both. Despite herself, Katerina felt her lips curve upward. The man had confidence, she'd grant him that, and knowledge of history, two qualities she found less common than they should be. There's a piece I think you'd appreciate, he continued, gesturing toward the far end of the gallery. If you have a few minutes. She should leave, return to the lodge, prepare for the border patrol with Mikhail. But the thought of facing Victor's instability again so soon made her just feel weary. A few minutes, she agreed. Rhys led her past the main displays toward a smaller case nestled in an alcove. Inside lay a sword unlike the others, not polished for display, its blade darkened with age, the hilt wrapped in cracked leather. 16th century Hungarian cavalry sabre, he said, still in its original condition, never restored or polished. The museum acquired it last month from a private collection. Katerina leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass. She was careful, though, not to touch the glass in case it might set off an alarm. The sabre's curve was elegant, designed for the slash-and-ride tactics of mounted combat. Even tarnished, the quality of the steel was evident. Her fingers twitched, longing to touch the hilt. It's beautiful, she murmured. It's scheduled for conservation next week. Rhys watched her face, something speculative in his expression. I'm overseeing the process. If you're interested, I could arrange a private viewing before we begin work on it. The offer was tempting, too tempting. Katerina straightened, caution reasserting itself. Why would you do that? Professional courtesy. He shrugged. It's rare to meet someone who appreciates these pieces for what they are. Most visitors see them as museum curiosities. You see tools. The observation was uncomfortably perceptive. Katerina studied him more closely. Rhys Morgan stood with the relaxed confidence of someone comfortable in his skin. His hands, when he gestured, moved with precision, a craftsman's hands. His scent carried no trace of fear or duplicity, just genuine interest. Dangerous, that interest, for both of them. He was perceptive enough to discover more about her than would be safe given enough time. I should go. She took a step back, breaking the momentary spell of attraction. Of course. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a business card, offering it between two fingers. If you change your mind about the sabre, or even if you'd just like to discuss blade metallurgy over coffee sometime. His dark brown eyes twinkled and there was that dimple again. The card was simple. His name, the museum's address, and a phone number. Katerina hesitated, then took it, careful not to let their fingers touch. I didn't catch your name, he said. I didn't offer it. She tucked the card into the pocket of her motorcycle jacket. His smile widened. Mysterious. I like it. Don't. The word emerged sharper than intended. Don't like anything about me, Mr. Morgan. It's safer that way. Instead of being put off, his expression turned thoughtful. Now I'm intrigued. Don't be that either. Katerina took another step back. Thank you for the information about the sabre. It was educational. She turned to leave, aware of his eyes following her, now troubled. The card seemed to burn in her pocket, a small rebellion against pack law and Victor's authority. A dangerous indulgence. Wait. Rhys's voice stopped her at the gallery entrance. He approached, keeping a respectful distance. I crossed a line, he said. I apologize. But the offer stands. Professional interest only. The conservation workshop is closed to the public, but the sabre is something special. If you'd like to see it before restoration begins, call the number. Ask for me. No coffee required. The sincerity in his voice made her pause. When? Conservation starts Monday. I'm here through the weekend, cataloguing the collection. He hesitated. Saturday evening would be ideal. The museum closes early, but I'll be working late. Saturday, 3 nights away, after her patrol with Mikhail, before the next full assembly at the lodge, a small window of freedom. Perhaps. She kept her tone non-committal. I'll hope for perhaps then. He inclined his head slightly. Enjoy the rest of the exhibition. Katerina watched him walk away, his movements fluid and purposeful. Her wolf stirred, curious despite herself. Not prey, that one. Something else. Something potentially more dangerous. She moved through the remaining displays mechanically, barely registering the other artifacts. The encounter had unsettled her, disrupting the calm she'd sought in this human space. Rhys Morgan saw too much, asked too many questions, created too many possibilities that tasted tantalizingly like freedom. What am I doing? She whispered to the empty air. No answer came. Only the distant promise of Saturday evening and a Hungarian sabre waiting in the conservation workshop. A small rebellion, a moment of connection in a life increasingly defined by isolation and worry for those she couldn't protect. Katerina walked toward the next room in the exhibit, her decision already made, though she wouldn't admit it yet. The wolf inside her paced restlessly, scenting change on the horizon. Hash, hash, hash. Attention museum visitors. The Atlanta History Museum will be closing in 20 minutes. Please make your way to the exits. Thank you for visiting. The announcement crackled through overhead speakers, breaking her reverie. Katerina straightened, glancing around the now empty exhibition hall. The elderly couple had vanished, leaving her alone with the ancient weapons and her increasingly complicated thoughts. She turned toward the exit, fingers brushing against the business card in her pocket. A professional courtesy, he'd called it. The offer to view a historical artifact before restoration. Nothing more. The lie tasted sour, even unspoken. Her wolf recognized the mutual interest that had sparked between them, a dangerous, unsought complication. Leaving so soon? Reese's voice caught her at the exhibition doorway. He stood in the connecting corridor, a leather-bound notebook tucked under one arm. The museum lighting caught the angles of his face, highlighting the strong jaw and observant eyes that had catalogued her with such precision earlier. "The museum's closing." Katerina kept her voice neutral, though her pulse quickened traitorously. "True." He smiled, the left dimple appearing. "But I thought you might appreciate one more item before you go. Something not on public display." Warning prickled along her spine. This was exactly the entanglement she'd resolved to avoid 5 minutes ago. Yet curiosity, her perpetual weakness, tugged at her. "What item?" His smile widened, satisfaction evident in the slight relaxation of his shoulders. A 15th century Scottish dirk, original grip, though the pommel stone's been replaced. "We're still authenticating the provenance, but the metallurgical tests suggest Highland's origin." "And where is this dirk?" "Conservation room, staff only." He gestured down a corridor marked by a discreet, authorized personnel sign. 5 minutes. I promise not to kidnap you into the secret underbelly of museum curation." The joke landed awkwardly between them, his expression immediately shifting to regret. "Sorry. That sounded less creepy in my head." A surprised laugh escaped her, short and genuine. The sound startled them both. 5 minutes, she agreed, against her better judgment. Reese nodded, swiping his ID badge at a security panel. The door clicked open, revealing a utilitarian hallway lined with office doors and storage rooms. He held it for her, maintaining a respectful distance as she passed. The corridor smelled of paper, dust, and concentrated human presence. Scholars and conservationists who spent their days handling history. Their footsteps echoed against the linoleum floor, the sound bouncing between institutional cream walls. "The conservation department takes security seriously," Reese explained, leading her toward a door at the corridor's end. "Most of these pieces are irreplaceable. Like the Hungarian sabre." "Exactly." He glanced at her, approval warming his expression. "Most people don't understand the significance. These aren't just old weapons. They're cultural artifacts, technological benchmarks. Each one tells a story about the people who made it, who wielded it." His passion vibrated in his voice, genuine enthusiasm without pretense. Katerina found herself responding to it despite her reservations. "The sabre speaks of mounted combat," she said. "The curve designed for the slash, not the thrust. Efficient from horseback." "Precisely." He stopped before a heavy door marked Conservation Lab. "Authorized personnel only." The dirk tells a different story, close quarters, personal, a weapon of last resort when the claymore couldn't be drawn. He swiped his badge again, punched a code into the keypad, and pushed the door open. The conservation lab stretched before them, a large, well-lit space filled with workbenches, specialized equipment, and glass-fronted cabinets. The air carried the sharp tang of metal polish, leather preservative, and archival solutions. 3 large tables dominated the center, each illuminated by adjustable lamps on articulated arms. "The dirk's over here." Reese moved to a side table where a slender blade lay on a padded cloth. Katerina approached cautiously, her senses cataloguing the room's exits and contents. Old instincts died hard, even in supposedly safe human spaces. And this was a room with many ways to kill a lichen if desired. The dirk measured perhaps 11 inches total, its blade darkened with age, but unmistakably well-crafted. The grip, wrapped in cracked leather, bore the wear patterns of centuries of hands. "May I?" she asked, surprising herself with the request. Rhys hesitated, then nodded. "Normally, absolutely not, but—" He slipped an antique silver ring from his finger, setting it aside on the workbench before reaching for a pair of white cotton gloves from a nearby drawer. "Here, Museum Protocol." He handed her the gloves, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her skin. Her wolf shivered in response. Katerina masked her reaction by focusing on pulling the gloves over her hands, conscious of his gaze. "The ring?" she asked, nodding toward the heraldic band he'd removed. "Grandfather's. Conservation superstition. Metals react to metals. I never wear it when handling the artifacts." He shrugged. Probably unnecessary with gloves, but traditions die hard. He pulled on a pair of gloves that matched the ones he'd provided her. Katerina nodded, relieved by the explanation. It was irrational, but she'd been worried for a minute that he'd intuited her dislike of silver. With gloved hands, she carefully lifted the dirk, testing its balance. Despite its age, the weapon retained a deadly elegance, the blade tapering to a wicked point. "Single-edged," she noted, "but the back edge is beveled near the tip, for penetration." "You have an excellent eye." Rhys leaned closer, his scent enveloping her. Most people miss that detail. It's a fighting adaptation, allows both the slash and the thrust in close quarters. The weapon felt right in her hand, an extension of arm and intent. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine its use, the desperate circumstances that would lead someone to draw such a blade, the skill required to wield it effectively. "We've created a reproduction for the educational program," Rhys continued, moving to a nearby cabinet. He withdrew a similar blade, this one obviously modern despite its faithful design. "Same dimensions, same balance. The museum lets visitors handle it during special events." He offered it to her, handle first. Katerina set the original carefully on its cloth before accepting the reproduction. "The weight distribution is impressive," she said, testing the replica with a controlled motion. "Whoever made this understood the original's purpose." "I did, actually." Katerina looked up, reassessing him. "You're a bladesmith?" "Among other things." His expression held no boasting, just simple acknowledgement. "My official title is Weapons Historian and Conservation Specialist, but I started in practical craftsmanship. Hard to understand these pieces without knowing how they're made." The revelation shifted something in her perception. Not just an academic, then, but a maker. Someone who understood steel and purpose on an intimate level. "The museum contracts me for authentication and restoration," he continued. "I also consult for film productions, historical reenactments, anywhere historical accuracy matters." And does it matter? The question emerged more genuine than she'd intended. Rhys considered this, his expression thoughtful. Truth always matters, even in small things. Maybe especially there. He gestured to the dirk. "This blade tells us how people lived, how they fought, what they valued. Distort that, and we lose something essential about who we were, about who we still are." The words resonated uncomfortably close to her own deception, a creature hiding in plain sight, her true nature concealed among humans who had forgotten the predators that once hunted their ancestors. "You're very philosophical for a weapons expert," she said, deflecting the sudden intimacy. "Hazard of spending too much time with dead men's blades?" His smile returned, warming his eyes. "They leave you wondering what will remain of your own life centuries later." A security guard's radio crackled in the corridor outside, the sound amplified by her sensitive hearing. Katerina tensed, suddenly aware of how long they'd lingered in this restricted area. "I should go," she said, carefully returning the reproduction dirk to the workbench. Rhys nodded, making no move to stop her. "Of course. Thank you for indulging my enthusiasm." She removed the gloves, placing them beside the original weapon. As she turned to leave, a question nagged at her, one she knew she shouldn't ask, yet couldn't seem to suppress. "Why show me this? Why offer the private viewing of the sabre?" He studied her, the directness of his gaze unsettling. "Because you see what others don't, the purpose behind the form, the story in the steel." He paused. "And because I'd like to know your name." The request hung between them, simple yet weighted with implication. Giving him her name meant acknowledging this connection, however tenuous. It meant a second meeting became more likely, more dangerous. "Katerina," she said finally, the syllables of her own name strange on her tongue after her earlier refusal. "Katerina?" he repeated, the pronunciation surprisingly accurate, with none of the American flattening of vowels she'd grown accustomed to. "Eastern European?" She nodded once, offering nothing more. "The sabre would interest you," he said. "Saturday evening, if you're still considering it. 7 o'clock after closing. I'll leave your name at the security desk." The promise of Saturday hung between them, reckless and tempting. Katerina knew she should refuse, should walk away and never return to this place or this man. Victor's rage from this morning flashed in her memory. What he'd do if he discovered her fraternizing with a human didn't bear contemplating. Yet the prospect of another evening away from the pack's suffocating politics, another conversation about blades and history rather than dominance and blood, pulled at her with unexpected force. "Saturday," she agreed, the single word a small rebellion. Rhys's smile deepened, genuine pleasure lighting his features. "I'll look forward to it." He escorted her back through the staff corridor to the main hall, maintaining a professional distance that nevertheless felt charged with unspoken awareness. At the public exit, he paused and held open the door for her. "Until Saturday, Katerina." She nodded, unable to form a response that wouldn't reveal too much of her conflicted thoughts. Instead, she stepped through the glass doors into the late afternoon sunlight, the transition momentarily dazzling her sensitive eyes. The museum steps stretched before her, leading down to the parking lot where her motorcycle waited. Katerina inhaled deeply, clearing her lungs of the building's artificial air. The breeze shifted, bringing a new scent that froze her mid-step. Musk. Peat. The metallic tang of old blood. Gideon. The scent was faint but unmistakable. Victor's enforcer had been here, recently enough that his distinctive odour lingered. Her gaze swept the parking lot, searching for his lanky silhouette or the black convertible he favoured but found nothing. Had he followed her from the lodge? Seen her enter the museum? Worse, had he witnessed her interaction with Rhys? Katerina descended the steps with forced casualness, her senses straining for any sign of continued surveillance. The russet wolf scent grew fainter rather than stronger. He'd been here but departed, perhaps called back to the lodge by Victor. She reached her motorcycle, the sleek machine, a promise of temporary freedom. As she swung her leg over the seat, her fingers brushed the business card still tucked in her jacket pocket. Saturday evening, a Hungarian sabre, a human who saw too much. Danger wrapped in the simple pleasure of connection. Katerina started the engine, its growl vibrating through her bones. She'd patrol the western border with Mikhail tonight, maintain the pretense of pack loyalty. But Saturday belonged to her, a small defiance against Victor's control, against the isolation of her existence. One evening, surely she'd earned that one little moment of rebellion. The question hung unanswered as she pulled onto the street, the museum receding in her mirrors.